Deleted session, May 1st, 1975. Good evening. Now, in the nature of personal reality, we discussed the nature of private beliefs. Someday there can be a book called The Nature of Cultural Reality. To some extent, Ruber is beginning to move in that direction now, in psychic politics, particularly with his codicils. First of all, of course, you do choose the culture into which you are born. The belief system is like a mental and spiritual climate. To some extent or another, each individual alive alters that climate, so that even if there were no revolutions, there would be constant change, sometimes gradual and sometimes sudden. People's beliefs do form the cultural system, which then exerts its influence upon the individual. The cultural system is not imposed, however, from some outside source, and it is not biologically predetermined. It has its biological aspects, of course, but war, for example, is not a biological combination of an aggressive instinct. Since it is formed by beliefs held by natural creatures, culture is, as Ruber states, as natural as your physical environment. Once you are born into a particular time and country, you do grow up in an almost invisible but definite environment of concepts, assumptions, and predetermined ideas that serve as a basis from which your own individual beliefs spring. There is a constant give and take between any individual and his cultural system. Now, Ruber was always a rebel in this life. At the same time, he possessed the natural urges to be loved and accepted by his fellow men. Rob noted Jane, as Seth pointed to our kitchen door. She could see it from her position in the living room. I had propped it open enough so that our cat, Willie, could get in when he felt like it. They said, our friend is in, I believe. Rob noted I closed the door and turned off the night light. Willie was already eating. They said he has an ability to identify with others and communicate. He has always been mentally quick and intellectually agile. As a youngster, the messages from others came so quickly that he was diagnosed as having an overactive thyroid gland. Actually, he was receiving unofficial messages that are usually neurologically censored. He could not allow them to become conscious in that world. As mentioned before, he was told to slow down, told he would burn himself out before he was 20. He climbed through belief systems with an unerring sense of direction, but as he toppled one, there was always another. When he finished with the Catholic Church, for example, he was certain that the secular, academic world offered the answers to the questions ignored, he felt, by religion. But that world of beliefs also was found highly limiting. The next was the system of science, and for some time he felt it to be a framework in which man could discover the truth about himself and his relationship with the universe. But always there was the hope that some established system was there someplace. So while he rebelled against any given framework, he was also certain that one did exist. When our material began, he was still convinced that science offered such a convenient framework. So, really, were you? A new science, certainly, parapsychology, but a recognized system though perhaps avant-garde. You have with all of these the natural need, again, to be accepted to some degree by your fellows, to find a point of relation, an accepted platform for relationships. His early religious friends quickly turned away when he felt the church. He was kicked out of college, and another bridge, he felt, had fallen down. Science fiction for a while offered science plus writing, a convenient platform, but the science fiction writers he met, and the field itself, he soon found as highly limiting. For a while, though he would not admit it, he felt that he would be welcomed with open arms by someone, meaning some sister. The spiritualists he found would do so and made overtures. The so-called occult groups would also, with their Gnostic brotherhoods. All he had to do was translate his experience into their terms. As before, he felt he was expected to translate it into conventional religious, academic, or scientific terms. These previous cozy hopes of such acceptance were quite necessary to couch him as he went about his own searches, because he did not want to admit that he was, in a way, now alone. His temperament is somewhat different than yours. You were alone in your family, but because he had no family, his aloneness was so apparent that he tried to hide it. Now, while this journey went on, and while he traveled through systems, disregarding, finally, one series of beliefs after another, he still carried to some degree certain basic root assumptions, held in different ways by all of those systems. Still carrying some of these himself, and with my help, he began a study of the nature of belief itself. He freed himself in important areas, yet all the time struggling against certain basic seeming inconsistencies. You are tinged by some of these beliefs as he is, for they represent those cultural colorations upon which all of your other systems are based. Since his consciousness and mine were more directly encountering our experiences, however, then the inconsistencies showed their strength more in his experience. Get out front some more and raise your fingers. I do not want to frighten you, but if we ever do the nature of cultural reality, it will be a fine book. Rob noted. I laughed. Rob answered, "Okay, I am glad to hear that, but I am not worried." Said Aunt, "Do you want a break?" Rob said, "No." They said, Rupert suddenly found himself then exploring very strange grounds indeed, and without the earliest sustaining hope. For all the recognized systems were wanting. He did not have to examine each one minutely, for his abilities, after some familiarization, left him with the knowledge of their merits. The stated discernible hypotheses of the various systems are one thing, but their invisible root assumptions are something else. Rupert tried to put his understanding to practical use in terms of daily life, your relationship, work, finances, his classes, yet he found himself with definite physical hassles. You have encountered them through your relationship with him. In certain areas you both have blazed ahead, those deeply seated, invisible, cultural assumptions still operated. However, some of them you both dismissed for the very simple reason that they never temperamentally suited you to begin with. Others you dismissed because you grew in wisdom. Now, Ruber wrote about it just lately, but he still does not realize how persuasive this one particular cultural belief is, and only by accepting it does his physical condition make any sense. To one extent or another, you both believe your world is hostile. You, Ram noted, pointing to me. They said, do not believe that nature is hostile, nor does Ruber. But you both accept the concept that there are hostile elements against which you must protect yourselves, and that the artist or writer or any sensitive, wise person is at a great disadvantage against a system in which he is born, and that he is to some extent at its mercy. Therefore, defenses are required in direction proportion to the hostility. Ruber felt that anyone who went outside the established systems would meet ridicule, so he protected himself against it. He did his thing, but he set about creating an environment of safety, and he would not go outside of it. He would not have to deal with so-called skeptics on the one hand, nor would he allow himself to be set up as an occult priestess on the other. Nor would he be an object of ridicule to neighbors, for they would not see him that much. The body's discomfort, as he wrote, would also tone down his inner pursuits enough so that he could intellectually handle them. Now, only a belief in hostility would justify such behavior. The behavior also says, look at me, you can't attack me because I am in such poor shape. It would not be fair play. As mentioned earlier, Ruber's sex as Jane was also connected, for he carried the beliefs of his culture that a woman would be ridiculed twice as quickly as a man. In the meantime, he seemed to have, in a certain way, nothing concrete to offer in terms that he felt people could understand, nothing for them to grab a hold of. The councils will offer new hypotheses upon which private life can be based, and in these, they are highly important. It is almost impossible for you, individually or together, to look back and see those beliefs you have dispensed with that were limited, but the framework still lingered. These are ideas, then, that Ruber must get through his head. It was necessary in the old frame of reference that he believed his body could not work properly. It was a method of operation that allowed him to go ahead with what he felt was reasonable caution. While it limited his inner and outer potential to some degree, he still felt overall that he was going ahead as fast as he dared to. The self is not trustworthy. That is another root assumption behind all of your systems, and here Ruber was experimenting with that self. In your system, insanity means uncontrolled behavior largely, so he began putting more and more control upon his physical actions, so that no one could say his work was the result of instability. He tried not to appear nervous, but in control, while he was temperamentally and physically fast. Put together, beliefs in a hostile world and an untrustworthy self, and you end up in difficulty if you are working with other concepts that tell you that spontaneity is good and that the self is to be trusted. For in the old framework, those ideas make no sense. If you do not challenge them, then you never come to the point of conflict. You do not even know that you have been taught to fear your own being. It never occurs to you to tread it. You go from expert to expert in whatever field of difficulty arises, and you have far more problems than you to have. Still, things seem to mesh together, for everything is the same color gray. Ruber felt that he needed protection. He also felt he had to discipline himself because he could not trust himself, and his symptoms served again to keep him at his work. Your society puts great stress upon the belief that there is a division between inner and outer, physical and mental activity. It is healthy to be athletic, unhealthy to sit at your desk. Your civilization believes that the body is mechanically organism alone. If you use it, it works. If you sit at your desk, it will become stiff. So the beliefs go. Ruber was also tinged by those concepts, so if he had to make a choice, he chose the writer's cramp. The body is a miraculous organism, changing in every moment. He believes that if it is not used properly, it will not work correctly. He believes that he should use it on the one hand, therefore, and not use it on the other. For if he uses it properly, how can he be sitting at his desk? The symptoms were based then on beliefs that he accepted, beliefs that are all quite basic in your civilization, invisibly entwined in all of those systems. He thought he had dismissed. Give us a moment, and give yourself a moment. There is more. You do things for him. These gestures, these helping gestures, serve as sexual reassurance. You prize his independent nature so, and you are so temperamentally different in certain ways, that he was ashamed at asking for reassurance of your love, though he knew you loved him. He wants you to open the car door out of old-fashioned gallantry. Instead, you do it because he cannot do it, simply will himself. This is also based on cultural sexual beliefs. He is afraid that you will not love him if he does not take the traditional woman role, and that if he does not, he has no right to expect such gallantry. Both of you, however, were highly suspicious of sexuality in connection with your work, and you, Joseph, did feel it a trap, which is why you married late. Ruber tried to hide what he thought of as characteristics that would frighten you, but the need itself was only camouflaged. Here I want to show how invisible cultural beliefs operate individually. You know about them, so it seems you are aware, yet you do not realize how firmly you accept them. I do not mean just you here. When you begin examining the strengths of beliefs, you are working with your own experience. You can make marvelous strides in one direction and still be held back in others by webs that didn't show up before, because you were not pressing against them. This session should be of help. Ruber must understand that the body itself is not impaired. The causes are important, because they offer a framework in which hostility is not taken for granted, and in which such behavior is not necessary. Rubber is like a tree, growing up surely toward clear spaces. So are you. The dead wood must be cleared away, however, the old beliefs that still linger, raised. You can decide that you like to work alone, that you do not want to do tours, not because the world is hostile, but simply because that is your way. When the phone rings, it is the hostile world out there, so it seems. That was what your father, Rob noted to me, Seth thought, when his phone rang. If Rupert now and then wants to cry on your shoulder, let him, and comfort him. It is natural enough when his body hurts. He would not do it freely, and only because he tries to hide such tears from you does the emotion seem so lonely. He is afraid you are afraid, as you are. But the feeling is never let go properly or healthily, and it is a natural reaction, not frightening at all. Its restraint holds back other expressions of love on both of your parts, and of laughter. The body condition itself will respond as this sensation is understood. You have made preliminary necessary changes. He actively wants to move about here, inside and out. He is moving somewhat faster overall, and overall he is somewhat straighter. Though not always. You are each afraid of giving much notice, however, for fear you will be misled. He would go in stores more, but he is afraid of humiliating you. Your own natural feelings toward him, your own natural sexual feelings, with their naturally allowed sexual gallantry, would clear that point. In the past, the long past, he discouraged your sexual gallantry in his certain for proving himself independent, and also then because he felt on the other hand that if he endorsed it, you would feel that he was tacitly demanding conventional female protection. He has grown more wise since. Do not project hostility upon your neighbors. Humanity is lively, curious and capricious, creative and exuberant, so neighbors can be curious without any hostile intent. I am giving no suggestions in detail, for what you have learned should suggest its own alternate reactions. Rupert is beginning to earn for physical mobility, and it will come with that desire and the altered beliefs that make it possible. Now, a closing remark. Your organizational structures are based, of course, on cultural beliefs. I will not go into them now, as they apply to organizations. But we do not need that structure. They are inner communications far more potent, and we are working with those. My heartiest regards and a fond good evening. Russ said, thank you, Seth, and good night. They said, if you could be really correlated with my time, then you could have the nature of cultural reality in no time.